Have you ever wondered what happens after a pen test report is delivered? Pen testing, short for penetration testing, is a critical component of cybersecurity. It's a simulated cyber attack against a system to check for exploitable vulnerabilities. While it's common to think that the job is done once the report is delivered, that's far from the truth. In reality, the journey has just begun. The pen test report is not an end, but a starting point. It's a guide to understanding the vulnerabilities in the system and provides a roadmap to address them. The real challenge lies in the post-report activities, which involve reviewing the report, prioritizing findings, planning remediation, executing the fixes, and validating that they work. These steps are vital to ensure that the system becomes more secure and resilient against potential cyber threats. So remember, the real work begins when the pen test report is handed over. And that's what we'll be exploring today. The first step in post-report activities is reviewing the report. Now, this isn't a casual glance over the document. Think of it as a meticulous dissection, performed not just by the security team, but also the client. Why? Well, the report is a condensed version of the entire penetration testing exercise. It's the roadmap to vulnerabilities, a guide to potential threats, and like any map, it needs to be accurate. So we scour every page, every line, every word for missing information, errors, or inconsistencies. Understanding the report comprehensively isn't optional, it's essential. It's about knowing the terrain before setting off on the journey. Imagine missing a critical vulnerability because of a misunderstood detail. The consequences could be catastrophic. This is why we take time to review the report, to ensure that everything it contains is accurate, comprehensive, and understood by all parties involved. A thorough review of the report sets the stage for effective post-report activities. Once the report is reviewed, the next step is to prioritize the findings. This task is fundamental in determining the order in which vulnerabilities will be addressed. The process of prioritization is influenced by several key factors. Firstly, the severity of the vulnerability plays a significant role. More severe vulnerabilities could result in larger breaches, making them a high priority. Secondly, the impact on the business is taken into account. If a vulnerability could potentially damage the business's reputation or lead to financial loss, it's given precedence. Lastly, the ease of exploitation is considered. Vulnerabilities that can be exploited with little effort by attackers are more dangerous and hence are prioritized. In this process, risk-rating systems prove invaluable. These systems rank vulnerabilities based on the aforementioned factors, making it easier to decide what needs immediate attention. Prioritizing findings ensures that the most critical vulnerabilities are addressed first. This approach keeps your cybersecurity efforts targeted and efficient. After the findings have been prioritized, it's time to plan for remediation. Now, what does remediation planning entail? Simply put, it's about developing a strategy to tackle each identified vulnerability, beginning with those of the highest priority. Think of it as a game of chess. You wouldn't rush in without a plan, would you? You'd analyze the board, assess your opponent's moves, and strategize your next steps. Remediation planning is quite similar. It's a systematic approach to securing your cyber environment. The first step in this process is understanding what needs to be fixed. This might involve patching systems. Patching is like applying a band-aid to a wound. It covers the injury and prevents further harm. However, it's not always about patching. Sometimes the problem lies deeper in the system's configuration or the way it's set up. In such cases, modifying configurations becomes necessary. Now, let's not forget that cybersecurity doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's intertwined with the way we conduct business. Therefore, changing business processes might also be part of the plan. For instance, if a certain practice is leaving your systems vulnerable, it might be time to revise it. But who does all of this? Who's involved in this planning process? Well, it's not a one-man show. It requires the involvement of all relevant stakeholders. This could include your IT team, your management, and even third-party vendors. The goal is to create a plan that is comprehensive, feasible, and in line with your business objectives. It's also vital to remember that remediation isn't a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process that requires regular re-evaluation and tweaking. The cyber landscape is ever-changing, and so should your defense strategies. In essence, remediation planning is about being proactive, not reactive. It's about identifying potential threats and taking steps to mitigate them before they can cause harm. It's about transforming vulnerabilities into strengths. A well-structured remediation plan is key to addressing the vulnerabilities identified in the pentest. So let's get planning. With a plan in place, it's time to execute and validate. Let's dive into the execution phase. This is where the rubber hits the road and our remediation plan is put into action. Each action is meticulously implemented, addressing the vulnerabilities identified in the pen test. But we don't stop there. We validate, we confirm that each action has effectively addressed its corresponding vulnerability. Now, you might think that's the end of the road, but it's not. We need to ensure that these vulnerabilities don't creep back in. This is where continuous monitoring comes into play. It's like a sentinel, keeping a vigilant eye on our systems, ensuring that those vulnerabilities we worked so hard to eliminate don't make an unwelcome return. Cybersecurity is not a one-and-done deal. It's a constant cycle of execution and validation. It's an ongoing commitment to safeguarding our systems. The cycle of execution and validation ensures that the pentest findings are effectively addressed. So, we've gone through the post-report activities in pentesting, but let's recap. The journey doesn't end at the report stage, it only begins. Reviewing the report is the first step, where we carefully go through the detailed findings of the pentest. Then comes prioritizing these findings, where we rank identified vulnerabilities based on their potential impact and exploitability. This helps to focus our efforts where they are needed most. The third step is remediation planning. This involves creating a comprehensive action plan to address the vulnerabilities identified, taking into account the resources available and the potential risks. Finally, we execute the remediation plan and validate its effectiveness. This ensures that the vulnerabilities have been properly addressed and that the systems are now secure. In a nutshell, these post-report activities are crucial in making sure that our pentest was not just a tick-the-box exercise but a meaningful process aimed at enhancing our cybersecurity posture. Remember, a pentest is only as good as the actions taken in response to its findings, so never underestimate the importance of post-report activities.